So a couple days ago, Saurabh Kumar, co-founder and CEO of resolve.ai, posted on LinkedIn about one of the toughest decisions facing enterprises today. Do we build or do we buy when it comes to AI-powered employee support? So that post struck a chord because it's not just theory. It comes from the real-world conversations with CIOs and IT leaders who tried to build this on their own. And the patterns were the same: promising demos that never reach production, budgets completely spiraling, and missing enterprise grade features. And of course, projects falling behind as the industry moves forward at a breakneck speed. So today I'm going to sit down with Saurabh to expand on that post and dig deeper into what he's learned. So Saurabh, it's good to have you here, man.
Excited to be here, Rob. Looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So let's just jump in. In your post, you wrote that the first 50 to 60% of a build is, well, you called it easy. You could spin up a quick proof of concept that everyone's super excited about, but then comes accuracy, reliability, and trust. And that's where things start to stall out. So why does that transition sort from demo to production seem to derail so many projects?
Yeah, Rob, great question. So a little background about myself. I used to be a buyer and a builder before we started Resolve.
Yes.
And the first company I started with had its own homegrown ticketing system. They were not using an industry standard ticketing system, right? So we've come a long way from people trying to build everything. When something new comes in, the tendency, especially in large companies, is to deploy the massive engineering talent that they have and try to build it, right? And it was true for ticketing 20 years ago, and it's true for AI today, right? But let's break it down on what's happening and what we're seeing from our experiences. So when you let's take a simple bot that does employee support, right? And what I mean by that the first 50-60% is easy, is it's easy to give a bot some sample content, make it answer those questions, right? It demos great. When you begin to take that idea forward, you begin to get into the messy part of the journey, right? Maybe now you're trying to bring in SharePoint content and you realize there's a whole bunch of content that you do not want the bot to be able to answer because it's private. Or maybe there's lots of conflicting information that the bot does not know how to handle, right? Or maybe it's in a format, maybe it's in a table or a PDF that your AI engine is struggling to read. Or maybe it's just the fact that you want it to be personalized by employees in Europe versus employees in US, right? All of these types of things begin to bog down what seemed like a happy demo. But when you begin to give it to users and try to put it out there, people are struggling, and it just kind of begins to die the death of 1,000 cuts at that point.
Cracks start to show, huh?
Yeah, and I've heard this so many times.
So you also called out cost overruns. These leaders think that they're going to save a bunch of money by building, but then those hidden costs begin to appear: compliance, integration, security, the teams that have to maintain it. Why are these almost always underestimated?
I think it's really tied into the other two dynamics that you touch upon. So when people think about how the cost would be, they take this demo and extrapolate like 2 engineers for 3 months, and that's how the cost is kind of initially laid out as the budget, right? What's often missed in that analysis, or that what I would call relatively simplistic assumption, is one, you need a lot of surrounding capabilities. It's not just that the core platform works. You're now talking about access control. You're talking about analytics and dashboard because your boss wants to know how the system is performing. You want to build observability to make sure your AI is doing what it's intended to, because your audit people might care about that, or your compliance officer might want to ask about that, right? You begin to start to think about all of these capabilities that go into an enterprise-ready product, and your costs start to balloon very, very quickly because you had not initially baked in all of those non-functional or surrounding requirements, right? So that's kind of one dimension. The other is what you and I were just talking about earlier, which is the fact that the work does not go linearly. As you get into the last 30%, it begins to ramp up somewhat exponentially. So the cost assumption is no longer that making it work for the last 20-30% is the same as the first 20-30%. It adds up quite quickly, which is again a assumption that people don't think about. And then lastly is just the pace of change in our industry, right? Things are changing very quickly. You started with a set of capabilities that maybe were state of the art 6 months ago or a year ago, but by the time you get to it, the technology has changed, the architecture has changed. There's better, faster, more interesting, more powerful ways to do things. And if you start to now begin to integrate that or begin to plan to integrate that, you're now looking at basically a never ending spend cycle, right? Because you have to now keep this team on board. So it just becomes very, very expensive. And people go from thinking it's $100,000 project to we're not talking about 50% or 60% cost overruns. We're talking about 5, 7, 10x overruns, right? It's a dramatic shift in the cost
A lot of
pattern.
money. Yeah. So you just mentioned the enterprise must-haves, the governance, the auditability, the explainability, the analytics, and I got to be honest, these aren't the most exciting items on the demo slide, but they're essential. And why do you think it is that DIY teams usually miss these? You talked a little bit about the risk, but how about the why? Why are we not looking at this ahead of time?
It's for the same reason I don't think of an oil change when I drive my car, right? I mean, it's not core to what you do or what you want to experience, right? It is like I
Sure,
want to just get in the car and drive,
that's right.
but the car needs new tires, it needs oil change, right? It has all of these things that we need. If we don't take care of them, it will stop working well, right?
Yeah, I'm
In
learning
the
that lesson right now.
on the enterprise side, a lot of these are what I call trust factors, right? AI is new, and being able to have the right explainability, being able to have the right analytics, being able to have the right security and access control, being able to make sure that you have thought about how to help people improve and build new content, you've thought about how to securely integrate with other platforms. All of these things are important to get through. Organizations are not clean and easy and well defined. They are messy, and there's people and there's legacy processes, right? And it's important as you begin to get through it, it's important to build that trust that allows you to scale and build your platform over time. And it's getting through these trust gates that I think people don't think about because they have a somewhat of a theoretical understanding of how to build it, but when you begin to get into it, you realize that it's more complex, more involved, more messy, and that's where all of these abilities of analytics and dashboard and security and compliance begin to come into play.
So in the post, you pointed out, and you talked a bit about it here already, but in the post, you pointed out how fast the industry is moving. So while these internal teams are still stuck on RAG, the market has already shifted to agentic AI, orchestration, multi-agent systems. So how truly big of a problem is that lag for CIOs who try to build?
Yeah. So it's a great factor because I'll tell you the pace of change in AI is the fastest in my few decades in technology that I've ever seen any technology
Absolutely.
evolve. And the reason for that is there's a lot of interest from startups, large legacy players. Like every company in the tech world is trying to innovate in the space, which means there's a lot of innovation happening, right? There's lots of money going, lots of talent going, lots of innovation happening. If you think about someone who's trying to build it, they might have a small team of a couple engineers who are trying to maybe just stay focused on the project requirement, get that done, while the world around is moving very, very rapidly. So, as an AI platform vendor, for example, if I take Resolve as an example, we have people tracking and looking at all of these things that are coming from different aspects, right? How you integrate maybe is moving to a new architecture with MCP and A2A. How you are taking advantage of the language model might be 5 is the latest today from OpenAI, but maybe Gemini will go from 2.5 to something else. So you're looking at all of these aspects of the components that go into a fully functioning platform, and you have a team that does nothing but just that, right? As opposed to a homegrown team where maybe you're on 2 or 3 different projects, maybe it's a very small team, maybe the team gets pulled into production support issues, right? So having managed internal IT enterprise teams for most of my career prior to Resolve, I can tell you it's not easy to have a large dedicated team working on one project for a long time, right? It's just not how enterprises fund things. So a small partially dedicated team getting pulled into multiple directions
Sure.
is not how you would be able to keep up with a market that's evolving this quickly.
And that brings me right into the hidden killer, domain expertise. So even if the tech works, the companies still need to design IT, HR, ops workflows, and they got to do it from scratch. And if that's not their specialty, why is the domain depth such an underestimated challenge in building these projects?
Yeah, that's probably the most compelling reason in a way, because it is. Let me tell you how DIY projects work typically in
Please.
companies, right? You would have someone in technology who would rely on an internal stakeholder or a sponsor to drive all of the thinking and the requirement. That person is usually a business person who's doing their job, but they're not a software product manager. This is maybe not necessarily what they do full time, but they have some requirements, they have some needs, so they give those needs to the team. They begin to work on those, but then again, to build a successful implementation, you need to step back and think about the full scale of the product, right? And as you begin to think about the depth of expertise in a domain is limited to a very small team if you're trying to do this in-house. But if you're a platform vendor that's focused on a specific domain, you're looking at multiple clients and you're looking at a lot of depth across those clients, right? You're trying to engineer deeper understanding of the domain into your platform. You're not coming to someone with a blank slate, right? So usually DIY teams have the disadvantage of starting with a blank slate and saying, okay, are we going to build this or that, right? I mean, you have to, every decision, every requirement, every workflow, every feature, you have to think and design yourself. If you're leveraging a product that's already purpose built for a domain, 99% of what you need, someone else had some need like that, and it's probably already in the platform. So you're just configuring and toggling. Imagine if you have to build your iPhone now and you're starting from scratch. Everything that's in that settings menu, if you have to think about all of those settings, that's probably like 15 years worth of Apple thinking about how to optimize all of those settings, right? If you start from scratch, it'll take you a long time to discover and document and communicate and finalize. And that adds like years, if not months, to the project, right?
So you've actually worked with organizations that started with a DIY approach, but eventually they came to your company, resolve.ai. Can you share a story without naming names where the turning point like really hit them?
Yeah, I mean, very recently we were talking to a client that's invested close to $1 million in a DIY project for something that did not go live, and we were able to help them go live in a few short weeks. And
Nice.
it's a story that I hear often, right? And the part of this conversation today is to spread this word around so companies are not, you as having been on the other side, don't have unlimited resources, you don't have unlimited budget. And I do this to caution my colleagues so that they don't spend money down a path that is very, very hard to get a payoff from.
So last question for CIOs and CTOs weighing this decision right now, what is the single piece of advice you'd give before they commit to building?
Yeah, I think the advice has not really changed since the advent of software package platforms in general, which is if you have a specific need that is somewhat common across the industry, use a product that's purpose built, use an AI platform that's purpose built for it. So if you're looking for employee support, something like Resolve is a great opportunity. If you're looking for
Sure.
sales or SDR or something like that, there's platforms that service these needs.
That's right.
The only place I would recommend you think of building something yourself is where you have a unique proposition that is generally not available widely in the market, right? And maybe you're doing some very specific thing that is unique to your organization or your team. And it makes sense to start with a general purpose language model or something to build from there, because if you take a platform, it may not exactly fit what you're doing. But if you're not solving for a very, very unique niche need, there are probably good vertical solutions for the problem that you're trying to solve. And I would definitely recommend starting with those.
Well, Saurabh, this was really fantastic. Guys, if you're not already following Saurabh on LinkedIn, I highly suggest you do it. His post is already sparking a lot of conversations. And this right here just brings it home. Building is expensive and it's often incomplete. And while buying gives you the trust, scale, and it gives you the trust, scale, and governance that enterprises really need. And so for everyone listening, be on the lookout. We'll be sharing more of these deep dives into the real decisions shaping enterprise AI. And you're not going to want to miss what's next. Saurabh, I really appreciate you coming on again.
Thank you, Rob. Enjoyed the conversation. Till next week.
Till next week.